Hello and welcome to this Thursday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm your host Anthony Smith, and coming up, Michael Vincent is going to give us a shipper update. But first, we're going to go to Strickland with the carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome to your Thursday carrier update presented by PowerFleet. I'm Strickland. So looking at our outbound tender volume index and outbound tender rejection index indices paired together on this chart here, we're seeing a trend line develop of a slowing of growth of both. They're both trending down over the last couple of days. We see tender rejection rates now under 26%. Again, still very high at 25.42%, meaning that, don't expect a lot of relief on the spot market. We're still seeing extremely high rejection rates, keeping pressure on those rates. But you could see some relieving pressure, and we'll get into that in a minute, in some of these markets that have been extremely hot over the last month or two. Tender volumes themselves, of course, coming down. The accepted volumes staying about where they were before. So basically, overall volumes are remaining stable, but at the same time, the rejections are coming down, bringing that index down a little bit more here over the last little bit. So looking at the nation, we see that we have a lot more red on our weighted rejection index map. Weighted rejection index, of course, the combination of both market share and weekly change in tender rejections. So anything in red means that we have probably had a significant change or decrease in outbound tender rejection rates over the last 7 days in markets that have a decent amount of volume, or they just have a lot of decline in their rejection rate over the last week with a low amount of volume. So either way, it's trying to prioritize which markets have the most significant changes in capacity week over week. And again, the bigger markets are going to get weighted more heavily here as we see Harrisburg and Ontario. Both these markets have been trading spots here over the last month or so about who has increasing rejection rates and decreasing rejection rates, as carriers have been struggling to keep up with that east-west momentum here over the last little bit. What we see down there, that El Paso, New Orleans, and all along the Gulf Coast showing some of the more significant increases in the weighted rejection index, meaning that capacity down there, you could anticipate increasing pressure on spot rates, anything outbound down there. So you see that illustrated up here. We've got New Orleans, El Paso, and the red showing the biggest weighted rejection index numbers of 5.9 and 7.8. And then we have Allentown, Harrisburg, Los Angeles, and Ontario, the big behemoth markets of the United States that really drive a lot of the capacity changes overall in the United States. Salt Lake City, Denver, the Intermountain areas showing also a decrease, as well as Dallas. So breaking down Ontario, California, we can see our outbound tender volumes remaining relative, they're falling pretty quickly in the orange line there, but still well elevated over where they were. Tender rejection rates themselves still very high, 25.41%, right around the national average for rejection rates. And again, Ontario still has a lot of reason to go there. There's still plenty of volume. There's still there's still an elevated amount of rejection rate, et cetera. Accepted volumes actually have gone up a little bit here. So that means that overall volumes haven't dropped at all. It just means that carriers are now accepting more loads, making it a little bit better on the capacity end, as they have been able to cover some of this freight a little bit better. But again, the trend line for the overall, tender rejection rates, tender volumes since about Labor Day, relatively flat. We don't think that this is going to necessarily be a long-term trend, as we still have a ton of freight coming in through the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. So California remains relatively a strong market to enter, and not necessarily something to worry about just yet if you are a carrier trying to enter that area, thinking that you may not get a spot load. So El Paso, this is on the other end of the spectrum. Weighted rejection index going up, tender rejection rates spiking here over the last few days, jumping all the way up to over 48%. Tender volumes themselves are also going up, accepted volumes staying about where they were, except carriers are not able to cover this region, or this market, I should say, as well as they were in the past. So again, anybody operating in the El Paso market for sure can expect a little bit more activity on the spot market, as well as increasing pressure on those spot rates. And that'll do it for today's carrier update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Hello, welcome to your shipper update. I'm Michael Vincent. Let's jump into it here. We're going to break down the area here around the Great Lakes, really from Pittsburgh over into Chicago. This is my old stomping ground, but that's not why I'm bringing this up. I really want to talk about the interplay that goes on between these different markets. They're not isolated, and they really affect each other quite a lot, actually. And if you're in one of these, like say Toledo or Cleveland, you've got to be watching what's going on in those other markets. We've talked about it before, where you need to really be looking at other modes of transportation and outside your own industry to see what those trends are, to see where those capacity tightenings are, the pressures on rates, and the ability for you to get your goods to market, or business to business or business to consumer as well. So you need to be looking at those. So let's break this down a little bit. On the right-hand side, or on the left-hand side here, I have a heat map up here, a 3D heat map of the outbound tender volumes and the outbound tender rejections. Now, the outbound tender volumes are in blue, and the outbound tender rejections are in the height, and you can see the varying colors that are here. Now, some of these colors that are here, like in the Cleveland market, for instance, is not necessarily due to what is happening in that Cleveland market, but it's what's happening in Columbus and what's happening in Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, even Indianapolis, and even in Chicago. On the right-hand side, I've got a market table that I like to use to break this down on a daily basis and see what's happening inside those different markets. As a shipper, this is a great tool for you guys. I've got haul on the first column there, and I've got all the markets on the left-hand side here: Cleveland, Columbus, Indy, Detroit, Chicago, Joliet, Fort Wayne, Pittsburgh, Toledo, and Grand Rapids. But haul is the measurement of the outbound loads versus the inbound loads, and the relative move there. Haul can be affected by either the outbound growing more than the inbound, or vice versa. It can also be affected by or outbound going up and inbound going down, which is really a difficult situation for shippers. Inbound tender rejects are the number of loads coming in that are being rejected, or the capacity coming into the market. Inbound tender volume is also a measure of the volume that is coming in and the capacity coming in. Outbound tender rejects is a result of the pressure on that outbound capacity and its ability to handle the loads that are coming out. And outbound tender volume is the number of loads that are leaving. So if we look at Cleveland across the top here, we see that their haul is down, meaning there's more inbound relative to outbound going into there. The inbound tender rejections, however, are also down 1.2%, meaning more loads are being accepted. But the inbound tender volume is down 1.5%, a little bit more than the inbound tender rejects. Their outbound tender volume on the far right-hand side is down 2.1%. So you would think that capacity would be loosening in this market. However, their outbound tender rejects are up 3.7%, and becoming more, capacity is becoming tighter and tighter. Look at the Columbus market below. Columbus market right there, big distribution market, is up 5.5% in their haul, meaning they're outbound from their inbound. Now their inbound volume is down. Their outbound volume is down less than the inbound, creating capacity crunch in Columbus, and it's such a large market that it's affecting the Cleveland market. Outbound tender rejections in Columbus at 2.4, up 2.4%, or at 28.33, almost 1 in 3 loads being rejected in Columbus, sucking capacity out of that Cleveland market as well, causing their outbound tender rejects to go up, even though you would expect it to be a soft market. I'm Mike Vincent. That's the breakdown. Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this Thursday edition of FreightWaves Now. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, you can check out our content on all your favorite streaming apps, including Apple TV. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.